Hello and welcome back to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett. I'm joined as always by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hello, Stephen. How are you, friend?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm a little shocked. We're already on the second half of the year, and
Oh, I know.
looking at the list, we got a lot of great shows planned for this year. But today we have a guest. Welcome to the show, Brian Webster.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Brian, you've been on our list for a while. You are a developer with interesting ideas as a developer. Always fun to hear from folks that are making the software we use. Specifically, your application is PowerPhotos, which has come up on the Mac Power User several times over the years. Every time we kind of go deep on Apple Photos or in the past iPhoto, we always told folks, well, PowerPhotos is where you need to go to solve most of the problems people have.
hmm
And we love that you're out there making it. And welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to getting into the weeds on photo stuff.
Yeah. Before we dig in today on more power users, that's the ad-free extended version of the show. We're going to be talking with Brian about the possibility of a low-cost MacBook. That's more in the news again, and we have thoughts. So if you want to sign up for more power users, you can do that over at relay.fm/MPU. Before we get started, Brian, though, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into this racket?
Well, I guess I started doing programming in high school. My high school had a programming course and got really into it. And then my older brother actually had a copy of the book Macintosh Revealed. It was one of the first programming instruction books for how to program on like the old Mac toolbox. This would
I
be
remember
back
that
in the
book. That
back
was
in the
the book.
90s.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the book. Yeah.
So I had a copy of Think Pascal and that book basically, and started poking around and teaching myself Mac programming. And then when I went to college in '96, and that's when Next bought Apple for minus $400 million. Uh, so I started diving into all the, like I said, it was OpenStep still, and then Yellow Box, and Cocoa, learning about Objective C and all that. I didn't have access to the software because you needed a developer. You needed a developer membership and that was like $500, which I did not have when I was in college. But eventually, I got my hands on when the Rhapsody project eventually got released as Mac OS 10 Server 1.0. That's a mouthful. I got my hands on a education discount copy of that and started poking around with Project Builder on my unsupported Wall Street PowerBook and just kind of dove right into it.
I love Brian. You were on the Mac the whole journey. That's you don't hear
Yeah.
that story very often, but
Yeah, I mean, we got a Mac Plus when I was, I don't know, 9 or something like that. I think it was originally for my brother and doing, being able to write papers and stuff like that. But of course, we mostly played games on it. But yeah, it just kind of, I don't think I even knew the PC existed until like high school or something like that.
It's such an interesting time frame. I love the way you said about Next acquiring Apple for a negative amount of money, because it really did change everything for the company. And as we've talked about on a couple of recent episodes with other guests, so much of what we use today came out of that, right? From Mac OS all the way down to Watch OS, right? There's a bunch of technology in there that its roots are in Next Step and OpenStep. But what's so fascinating to me about this time period, and this is really where your projects come in, is that Apple took an operating system that was on top of Unix. It had the Mach kernel, but then it made a consumer-friendly operating system with consumer-friendly apps. And Apple had this whole push starting in 2000, 2001 about the digital hub, that the Mac is going to be the center of all your digital lifestyle. So music, and the iPod came out, and movies, you had iMovie and later iDVD. But a big one in 2002 was iPhoto. Digital cameras were coming onto the scene, and Apple said, "Hey, we're going to make the Mac like a really valuable tool for people who want to take digital pictures and manage them." I mean, I remember when iPhoto came out in '02, I was in high school, and before then, I had played with the digital camera a little bit, but I had scans from a film camera, and they were just like in folders, right? There was not a
Mhm.
great way to manage them, and all of a sudden, iPhoto comes along and really gives you like a visual way to organize your photos. And the early versions were very simple, but over time became more powerful and more interesting. And just like the time frame from Next and Apple joining to the iLife suite and it being like this creative tool for the masses, it's just an interesting arc.
Yeah, yeah, and I think career-wise, I was very fortunate timing-wise to be coming out of college right when Mac OS 10 was, on the ground floor and going upward, and happened to get into that as a career and just kind of ride the wave upward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you graduated college as it's getting released, so that was
Yeah,
kind of the perfect spot for you to find your toehold.
yeah, I want to say it was like March 2001 was that 10.0,
Yeah.
and then I
Mm-hmm.
would have graduated in May. So yeah.
So at what point did you say, "Hey, I'd like to make a utility to make iPhoto better"?
Well, so one of the classic, like when people are looking to get into learning how to program, learning development, one of the big problems you run into is like, hey, well, I wanted to do something, but what should I build? What should I work on? And one of the classic responses to that is like, well, build something you would use. Build something that scratches your own itch. And iPhoto Library Manager, this is the predecessor to PowerPhotos, was iPhoto Library Manager. iPhoto Library Manager was not that at all. I am ironically not much of a photographer myself. I think I might have owned a digital camera back then somehow, but it really started just as a way for me to learn Cocoa and do something in Cocoa and put out a little program. So I guess basically what I remember is that they came out with iPhoto. That would have been 2002, and I want to say it was probably on macOS10hints.com. Do you remember that website?
Yep,
Um,
macOSXhints.com.
hmm someone posted, someone found a user default key that said, hey, if you switch, if you do this command line thing, you can switch where the iPhoto library is stored. And so I thought to myself, well, that's cool. That's kind of a pain to have to drop into the terminal. So I put together a very, very bare bones app that was iPhoto Library Manager 1.0. And it really was just, you have a library list and you could create libraries and switch libraries and remove libraries. And that was about it. And I just put that up on versiontracker.com as freeware, and people started downloading it. They really seemed to enjoy it.
Feels like such a different age, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it's like I got like 100 downloads today. This is amazing.
mm-hmm.
Although I think you totally tricked us because I thought you were going to say scratching my own itch, like, "Oh yeah, I needed a library manager." No, you just needed a project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My own personal photo setup is bog standard. Like I take pictures on my iPhone and sync them with iCloud, and that's about it. I've got a couple other libraries laying around, but it's
Mm-hmm.
primarily just a single library.
But you hear from some very large library holders, I bet, among your customers.
Oh yeah, I've seen things.
I bet.
Yeah,
Um,
but 100 downloads freeware doesn't sound like it probably paying the bills at that point.
No, at that point, I was, I graduated college, and I guess it was shortly after, it was like right around the same time I came out with IPLM. I got my first job, and I worked for a company called Allsoft. They're best known for Disk Warrior, the disk repair utility.
Oh yeah, Disk
Um,
Warrior solves so
I
many problems. I That used to be a very common recommendation on this show when people
Yeah.
were really in trouble. That was like bringing out the big guns.
Mm-mm. your drive wouldn't even show up in the Finder, and all your stuff is on there, and you have a heart attack, and then you go get Disk Warrior, and you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So I started working there. I actually didn't primarily work on Disk Warrior. I worked on they had another app called Master Juggler, which was a font manager utility, and it was a curious experience because they've been around since 1984. Like this is an old school Mac development shop, but I come bombing in there out of college and have never made a product in my life. But I was the only one who knew anything about Objective C, Cocoa, Next, and any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I was in the weird position of sometimes of being by far the least experienced person there, but they would be the ones asking me questions about like, so how do auto release pools work again? Like uh, these weird Objective C questions.
And then how long did you stay with Allsoft?
So I was there. I guess I started in 2002, and I ended up leaving in 2006 when I went full indie that year.
Nice.
And it wasn't just your iPhoto tools. You also have an application called plist Edit Pro, which is not the focus today, but I'd love to hear a little bit about how that came to be and how it played into your going indie.
Yeah, so that was actually the first product I ever sold. The first versions of IPLM were free. Um, and yeah, basically, Apple had their property list editor app that was included alongside, I think it was still Project Builder at that point. And it was super bare bones and frustrating and didn't have like copy and paste or undo or any, it had nothing. So I plist Edit Pro was kind of written in anger at just wanting to have a property list editor that would actually do all the basic things you expect from an app. But that did give me the good experience of getting a full product out there. I signed up for Accelerate as my payment processor, got a serial number scheme all set up, so I was able to do all that stuff in a more low stakes environment, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been 2004. I think that came out for the first time.
I kind of like that phrase written in anger. I feel
Oh yeah.
like it kind of describes a lot of your, because like iPhoto Library Manager and Photos or PowerPhotos, I'm not sure you wrote them in anger, but they solved deficiencies with Apple's apps.
Perhaps they're purchased in anger.
There you go.
There you
Purchased
go.
in anger.
There you go. Of course, iPhoto no longer with us. They transitioned to Photos, and that's where we get PowerPhotos in 2015. So hard to believe, but 10 years ago.
I actually thought about you. I remember when they announced Photos, and I thought, I wonder what's going to happen to iPhoto
Yeah,
Library Manager.
yeah, I remember that day too. That was an interesting day.
Yeah, it's not really Sherlocking. It's something else, right? Where like what you're writing against gets changed, but
It's a rug pull. I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, they weren't aiming at me or anything,
no.
but yeah, there was a good. Well, I remember the order of the keynote. That was the year they first introduced iCloud Photo Library.
Mm-hmm.
So they went through the whole keynote and did iOS and iPad, and we got new iCloud library. It syncs between your devices, yada yada, and then they get to the Mac portion at the end, and they go through all the new Mac features. And then at the very very end of the Mac portion, Craig Federighi says, "Oh yeah, one more thing. We're also bringing photos to the Mac, and we're getting rid of iPhoto completely, and it can sync to iCloud just like your iPhone can, and it'll be available sometime next year. Bye." And that was it. So, and I was just sitting there with my jaw hanging down, like, what just happened?
Yeah.
So then, yeah, then there was I had about a 6 month limbo there where I didn't really know what to work on next because it certainly wasn't iPhoto Library Manager, but I didn't even know what the new Photos app would be capable of yet. But thankfully, they did have a short beta period. They had it in beta for a couple of months, so that let me scramble together PowerPhotos 1.0 to at least have something out by the time they officially shipped photos.
And I mean, from my perspective as a user, it just seems like you kind of just moved right along with it. I mean, my Power Photos tool set now is, I think, actually bigger than it was with iPhotos, if memory serves.
Yeah, I mean, it's the PowerPhotos code base was based on iPhoto Library Manager. I actually, when I first started ripping stuff apart, I wasn't even sure initially that it was going to be a separate, two separate programs. Like I was seriously considering in the very beginning just have one program that would handle both iPhoto and Photos libraries in the same interface. Ultimately decided not to do that, obviously, which I think turned out to be the right call. But yeah, things were moving past to that stage.
All right, Brian. So we're going to talk about Power Photos later in the show. I just wanted to check in with you on your Apple gear. Have you joined the Apple Silicon Revolution and all that?
Oh yeah. Let's see. I'm currently rocking. I guess this is an M4 Max, MacBook Pro, the 16-inch variety. I've always gone for the big screen laptops. I loved the. I got several of the 17-inch laptops back
I
when.
remember the Battleship.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. I
that
I
was a
I shed I shed a tear when they discontinued that line.
yeah. I remember like that was a big computer. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah. All right. So now,
uh,
do you work with the screen on it? Do you like have the lid open? Do you code right onto the laptop screen, or do you plug into a monitor?
um, Most times during the workday, I have a 4K monitor that I hook up to in my office, which also doubles as the dining room in the house. Uh, and so I'll have the monitor in front of me, and then I have the laptop open to the left as a separate screen, not mirrored or anything,
Yeah.
but it mostly serves as an auxiliary screen. I'll have you know documentation, or if I'm watching a video or something, put it over there, or just have desktop background with picture of my kid. So I'm mostly focused on the big monitor when I'm working.
When you gonna what are you using for Apple mobile stuff?
I have state of the art iPhone 12 Pro. That's
All
my.
right.
I think I'm due for an upgrade this year, but each year I'm just like, my phone's doing okay,
I mean,
and
the days are certainly past where you need to upgrade every year. I mean, it's just
yeah, and I don't know. I sometimes feel like I'm kind of a bad Apple nerd because I don't buy every latest gizmo and gadget and keep up to date every year. That's never been my style. I actually don't even own an iPad at all. I just haven't found a need for one.
and, I think that's very common among developers. Developers are Mac people.
Yeah, I mean that's basically, yeah. I mean I'm so comfortable on the Mac that um, anything I do on a bigger screen of an iPad, I'm just as comfortable doing on the Mac. So
Hmm.
yeah, and aside from that, I've got I love my AirPods. I wear my AirPods basically all day, every day. And I've got a Series 10 Apple Watch that never leaves my rest except for bedtime. But aside from that, I have a pretty simple setup overall.
I know in iOS development land, something I'm much more familiar with than Mac OS development land, you end up with a lot of devices on your desk. You got like phones and iPads and watches testing different OSs, different hardware. How do you approach that with Mac development? I mean, maybe you've got a library of like MacBook Airs running different versions of Mac OS, or are you relying on VMs? Like, walk us through your sort of testing environment a little bit.
Typically, what I've found over the years is that for the most part, I don't really need to test separate hardware on the Mac. Like, I mean, my particular app is not very hardware focused, particularly. So,
Sure.
the difference between an M4 Mac and an M1 Mac is not going to be much. I do still have an Intel Mac around in case I need to test something. think I've maybe had to do that like once since Apple Silicon came out. So yeah, I it's mostly about versions of the operating system that I need to test against, and most of that stuff I can do using VMs or occasionally putting an OS on a separate partition to boot into.
It feels to me like more and more people are on Apple Silicon at this point. That it's getting pretty small. The people left in Intel.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I mean, there's still like, I think it's with macOS Tahoe, it's basically kind of the last model of each of the Mac Intel lines. It's maybe one or maybe two models that are left supported. So, well, and obviously they announced that the next OS after Tahoe will drop Intel entirely. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely seems to be fading out.
Then I think of my mother-in-law with her 12-and-a-half-year-old MacBook Air who can't imagine why she needs to upgrade. So
Hmm.
there's that.
I mean, on the other hand, I do still like. Let's see. So PowerPhotos currently supports back to macOS 14 Sonoma. I do keep older versions of PowerPhotos available for people who are running older versions of the operating system. Like those don't get updated anymore, but I leave them out there and available for someone who just has an old Mac and can't upgrade, and they won't get all the latest features, but they can at least run it. And I do see people running those old versions. It's not a huge number, but they're certainly out there.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com/MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code MPU. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform designed to help you stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or scaling your business, Squarespace gives you everything you need to claim your domain, showcase your offerings with a professional website, grow your brand, and get paid all in one place. I'm a fan. I've been using Squarespace since they first launched. I still have a Squarespace website. With Squarespace, you can make the most of Blueprint AI, Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder that lets you quickly and easily build a site bespoke to your business. Just input some basic information about your industry and goals. Plus, we already know and love Squarespace for their professionally designed and award-winning website templates. However you start, you have beautiful design options, no experience required. I ran my legal website through Squarespace, and I had so many lawyer friends asking me who designed my website, and I had to tell them I just did it on a monthly account with Squarespace, and I used one of their templates. If you're thinking about SEO, Squarespace has got you covered there too. Nobody wants to build a beautiful website only for 0 people to see it. That's why every Squarespace website is optimized to be indexed with meta descriptions, an auto-generated sitemap, and more, so more people find your site through search engine results. Don't take my word for it. Head over to squarespace.com/MPU for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/MPU with the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for the Mac Power Users. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of the Mac Power Users and Olive Relay.
So let's get back to PowerPhotos. We spoke about the beginning of it, wanting to build a tool, wanting to develop on the Mac, and finding an opening back in the iPhoto days. And what I love about that is that really continues to be the case. Like David said earlier, Brian, your software really feels like you're addressing things that Apple has left unaddressed in Photos. And I want to talk about the challenges of that a little bit before we get into the features that PowerPhotos currently has. But you are building an application, a Mac app that interfaces with the Photos library on the user's machine, allowing them to do things that Apple hasn't built. And I guess in a sense that means your feature list is kind of a to-do list for Apple, right? If they get to some point to merge photo libraries and that's a feature you have, then you've got to pivot or change. How do you think about those things in the long term? I mean, this app has been around a long time. If Apple goes into Photos and fixes something or adds something that you offer? Like, how do you respond to that, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely over the years when I'm deciding what I want to add to PowerPhotos or iPhoto Library Manager, I definitely do try to focus on things that Photos doesn't already do itself, and I think there's a lowish probability of Apple doing themselves. There actually have been a couple things over the years that Apple has added. What kind of the big feature that I wrote, I guess it would be iPhoto Library Manager 3 was the first paid version. And the big feature I was getting requests for was merging libraries. Because those early versions of iPhotos really couldn't handle very many photos. And one of the main reasons people wanted to split up their library was just because it was so slow.
Yeah, yeah. Back in the day on like a G4 with a spinning hard drive, it could bog down.
Yeah, if you got to like a thousand photos, forget about it. But Apple improved iPhoto over time, and was able to handle tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands. So eventually, people wanted to merge those libraries back together. But Apple actually, I guess it was not. Yeah, it was. I forget which version. At some point in the late iPhoto days, they had iPhoto and Aperture kind of converge over their library format, and eventually you were able to take an iPhoto library and open it in Aperture, and vice versa. They had basically the same underlying format. And Aperture actually had the ability to merge Aperture libraries, and when they added that iPhoto support, that actually meant that you didn't need iPhoto Manager anymore to merge libraries. You could do it using Aperture if you wanted. So that's one instance of like, Apple technically did have a way to merge libraries, but I could always try to find a way to either make it easier or do some things that Apple's version didn't do. So even, I guess the other big example is a few versions ago, Apple added their own duplicate finder feature to the Photos app, which has been a feature of PowerPhotos and IPLM for a while now. Just because I have found that once Apple adds a feature like that to an app, it usually kind of stands still. Like they check that box off and then don't really think about it again. So even if they do add a feature that one of my apps is competing on, there's usually still room to do it better or do something differently with it.
Yeah, and like I feel like I've just never felt like Apple is coming for the types of features you are adding because it's
Hmm.
like library management stuff, and I think they're in their Apple world. Nobody needs this stuff, right? They feel like, well, nobody needs to merge libraries. Nobody needs to, they want the users to live within the constraints of the software. I mean, you've been making this now between iPhoto Library and PowerPhotos almost 25 years. I mean,
Hmm.
that's crazy. And I just don't feel like I think you're okay. I think you're more at risk of them just stopping making Photos apps than anything else, which I don't think is likely.
Well, at least I wasn't, basing all my stuff on Aperture. That would have
Yeah, that well, poor Aperture.
been
And now we've
horrible.
got this weird situation where they bought Pixelmator, but nobody really knows what that means. I mean, you may have another exciting year ahead of you at some point when they maybe fold that stuff into Photos. I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, I mean, honestly, for me, one thing I've purposely shied away from in Power Photos is I don't deal with editing photos at all. Like that's just
Hmm.
Yeah.
not part of the bag that I'm interested in getting involved in. I'm concentrating on organization, management, cleaning things up, metadata stuff like that kind of thing.
Yeah. One of my absolute favorite features in Power Photos, and I use it all the time, is the metadata editing. I find Apple's interface for it really kind of frustrating. Like their inspector panel doesn't always work the way you think it would, and you can't bulk edit everything. So like I've had this project kind of in the background forever of like I want to add keywords to a bunch of photos to make search easier. I want to photos without GPS. I want to add GPS to them. And like some of that stuff I can bulk edit in Photos, but a lot of it you can't. And Power Photos makes it really easy just to like grab a selection of photos and tweak the metadata. It's almost funny to me because Apple would rather you not think about the metadata. It's like, no, don't worry about that. Like they input it for their search and stuff, I guess. But when it comes to editing and managing it, I think that's one area that you've really stood out.
Yeah, this is one of the, this was new in the latest version 3.0, and this is one of the first major ones where this is something, you can edit your metadata in Photos, but it kind of sucks. So I wanted to do a better version of that, and I see a lot of people looking for the ability to do that stuff, especially batch editing. So kind of the two things I whittled it down to were, yeah, one, like you mentioned, being able to batch edit, and you can do titles, keywords, and captions, but also being able to, even the batch editing in the photos, like you can select a bunch and you can give them all the same title or the same caption, but being people want to do things like, and put the date as part of their title. That's a very common one. So
Mm-hmm.
if you export it, you can have your file name have the date in it, or have an incrementing counter. If you want to, have your photos in a particular order, you can number them 1, 2, 3. Like it's fairly basic stuff, but it's something a lot of people are looking for. I had seen a lot of, kind of hack together Apple scripts and stuff over the
Yeah.
years that could kind of sort of do it, but it's not a lot of fun. So yeah, it was that batch editing stuff, and then even if you're just in the Photos interface, even if you just want to get through a lot of like you say, you want to just add titles to photos, because the info window is the separate window and has the keyboard focus. Like there's not an easy way to just iterate through your photos and just type in titles. So I was specifically looking for an interface where you can do all that stuff without your hands ever leaving the keyboard, which is another thing that is, kind of an afterthought in a lot of apps these days. Having, I guess you could call that a power user feature, having full keyboard support and being able to do a whole bunch of work without ever having to have your hand hit the mouse.
Well, I mean, you said power users. I feel like that your app is just aimed at them, right? People who want to get the most out of the Photos app, who the built-in tools aren't enough for. I was curious. I mean, how big are some of the libraries your customers are dealing with?
I mean, I regularly see libraries 100,000 or more. I've seen libraries as high as like 300,000 or 400,000. That gets pretty, even with Photos. Like Photos does a pretty good job of handling large libraries these days, but even Photos will start to struggle when your library gets that large.
Yeah, wow. I'm getting up there. I mean, I'm not at six figures yet, but one of the things that hurt me is the sharing feature, because my wife and I just share all of our pictures,
Mhm.
and my wife takes so many pictures.
Are you using the shared photo library?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's just like, yeah, okay, well, there are, 17 pictures of a plant here. All right.
Cool, cool.
So we talked about the metadata, the sort of photo library merging and breaking apart, which I would imagine, like you said, is maybe less of a use case now than it was in the past. But can you talk a little bit about some of the exporting you can do with Power Photos?
Yeah, the export feature that was added in 2.0, that was another one that, obviously Photos has an export function which does fine. But over the years, I had exactly two major features that I had everyone asking for. One was if you had your photos organized into albums, and especially if you had like a folder hierarchy in your album list and had nested folders and nested albums, being able to do an export of one of those folders and have a similar folder hierarchy created in the Finder. So have subfolders created that mimic your album hierarchy in your photo library. And that's something the Photos app has never done for whatever reason. It seems like.
Yeah, it's really anemic, the export features out of the native Photos app. To this day, I never understood why they never made that better.
Well, again, it's there are a lot of these features that, like, once they exist and that checkbox is off, is checked off. I feel like it's very hard for them to come. I don't know if it's an organizational thing or whatever, but yeah, a lot of them, once it's there, you rarely see them touched significantly again.
So you fixed it.
So I fixed it. Oh, the second feature, which I found curious, but it kind of makes sense, is that a lot of people will export a whole bunch of the pictures, and then they'll go look at them in the Finder. And especially if you're looking in list view and you have the columns up for creation date and modification date, those are the file creation and modification date, which is different from the EXIF, the date, the capture date of the photo, which is stored internally in the photo. So people would export their photos, but all the creation and modification dates would be set to today, because
Yeah,
that's when
yeah.
the files were created. But they don't want that. They want to be able to export and have those dates set to the date that their photo was taken. So that's those two things are kind of the two major additions that PowerPhotos export adds above what Apple does. There's a couple other little things in there. I get people using that stuff all the time now.
I think a lot of listeners know that under the covers, the Photos library is really a big database. And if you're in Finder, you can, right click and like drill down and drill down and drill down. Well, but that's how it's always been. Even the iPhoto days back when it was slow on your PowerBook, it's because it was a database and the computer had to traverse all those things. But how is it interacting with the Photos library? I mean, you're dealing with data that obviously people find very valuable and important. You're messing with or interacting with a database for an application kind of behind its back. Like, how do you approach that? And has Apple made that harder over the years to deal with the data directly?
There have been a lot of phases over the years. Back in the iPhoto days, there was definitely a lot of hacking around. Most historically, up until the last few years, historically most of the modifications that IPLM or PowerPost did were done through AppleScript, because that was basically the only way that Apple provided that you could actually make changes to the library. Back in the iPhoto days, I was iPhoto library manager, ran a little wild, and was doing more unseemly things behind the scenes in terms of code injection and accessing the database directly, and so on and so forth, which was risky, but I think turned out to be worth the effort, because it enabled the features that people wanted. And I screwed up once or twice, but for the most part it turned out okay. And then probably the biggest change was when macOS Catalina came out. So back in, let's see, when did it come out? I think iOS 8 added a framework called PhotoKit, which is the Objective-C and Swift framework for being able to access and modify the photo library, like the official Apple API for it.
Suddenly you had proper tools, right?
Well, the iOS people did. Um, so when, I don't know what year iOS 8 would have come out, but for many years that framework did not exist on Mac OS. Like there was no framework. There was a framework called Media Library Framework, which had read-only access and was buggy, and I use it because I had to, but in the early Photos days on the Mac, I still had to do most of my stuff via AppleScript. But in Catalina, that's when they first released Mac Catalyst to let you bring your, iOS developers could bring their iPad app and compile and run it on the Mac. And in order to do that, they needed to add support for all these iOS frameworks. So finally, and that would have been 10.15. Finally, I had access to the PhotoKit framework too. I had access to the PhotoKit framework finally, so that let me do a lot more granular modifications than I could do with AppleScript. It was a lot faster. It's officially supported. So once I was able to do that, then I was able to really get more and more stuff up and running with PowerPhotos in the later years.
So you've been on a journey.
been on a few journeys, yes.
But I do like that though, that Apple did open that stuff up, because writing this in AppleScript is a little harrowing, frankly, for big libraries. And AppleScript never does that well when you've got it running at a lot of data. So at least now you've got a proper way to do it.
Yeah, and that's definitely been, there was the first few years of Photos, I was not able to add very many new features to PowerPhotos because I was spending all my time just keeping up with the OS releases, figuring out how to work with, various stuff that would break in each new version of Mac OS. But then once I got access to PhotoKit, then finally that's been like a stable foundation to work on. It's been a lot better since then.
Yeah, I didn't realize until we started prepping the show that Photos has been out 10 years now, as has
Hmm.
PowerPhotos.
Hmm.
As somebody who deals with like the big libraries and the users, the power users of Apple Photos, what's your general impression of how it's doing these days?
I mean, in terms of stability and stuff like that, it's Photos has always been. I'll say it's definitely been a lot more stable than iPhoto ever was. It's like I think it's one of those. What's the term? There's a thing they called second system syndrome, where you come out with a version of your software and you see all the stuff that's wrong with it and decide, I'm going to rewrite it from the ground up, and then it gets even more complicated and you know uh, forgets all the past mistakes that you did with the first version. And so you're supposed to never rewrite from the ground up. But I think Apple made the right choice in this instance to jettison iPhoto because it was just getting so long in the tooth and was not ever designed to interact with like a cloud syncing service or any of that stuff. So even version one of Photos was pretty good, and stability wise, like it's not perfect, but it's been pretty solid over the years, as well as iCloud syncing. Again, not perfect, but in the array of Apple's various iCloud features, it's been one of the stronger ones for sure.
You forget about that, like, because we were making Mac power users, during a lot of the iPhoto run, and it was very common at the time when we'd have guests or we'd hear from listeners that just had a catastrophic failure with iPhoto at some point, and they didn't trust it anymore. And everybody had these like bizarre, kind of like Dropbox photo storage systems. In fact, Stephen, your other, what was it? I forget. You and Federico and Mike used to always cover like the photo app of the month or something.
That all die.
Yeah, but you forget that was like a thing that people didn't trust with good reason. And now I think most everybody just takes photos for granted that, yeah, it's going to save my photos and I'll be fine.
Well,
And we heard,
and one signal you can see from that is that iPhoto Library Manager actually had a dedicated rebuild library command because so many people's libraries would fall over and get corrupted that had a feature that would trawl through the library and look for all the data it could and try to rebuild a fresh library from the data it can find. But PowerPhotos has never had needed to have that feature because it's just doesn't happen that often.
Actually, I remember pushing that button in the old version of iPhoto Library Manager, but a couple times. Always made you a little nervous, but it usually got things back together for you.
Well, it would, it would never modify the original library. I always created a
Yeah.
new library and just did everything there. So try to keep things low risk.
So I guess Photos is doing okay.
Yeah, I think Photos, it doesn't get a lot added each year, and Apple is mostly concentrated on, they seem to revamp the UI every few years and add editing stuff, but in terms of the organizational capabilities doesn't seem to change a whole lot. They seem to focus more on the visual aspect of things.
Well, even though Photos is doing good, there's certainly a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, that actually do want a little more power out of their Photos application. And Brian has been nice enough to agree to give a time-limited discount code for Mac Power Users listeners.
Yeah, anyone, if you enjoy PowerPhotos and want to buy a copy, you can go to www.fatcastsoftware.com. You can download. There's a free trial you can download, try out most of the features, and then if you want to purchase the license, you can use the code MPU for a 20% discount.
I have to ask you, because I've been buying your software for decades now. Every time I see that name, Fat Cat Software, is there an actual fat cat in your life, or
there was?
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
she wasn't that fat, but enough for an alliterative company name.
I like it. Like, we need a name, and there's a fat cat in the corner. We got it. We got a name.
I remember back Daniel Jalka of Red Sweater Software.
Yeah.
He back in the day, he made an observation that there were a lot of these indie Mac companies that were of the form, adjective noun software. And so I think he wrote a little page with a JavaScript where you could generate your own software company name. It would have a list of adjectives and nouns. You could, purple manatee software or whatever.
Perfect.
Rogue Amoeba, Fat Cat, Red Sweater,
Bare
all the good
Bones.
ones.
Yeah,
Bare Bones.
exactly.
Yeah.
Flying meat. Yeah, all those. Delicious Monster, the big one.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Indeed. If you're looking to expand your team at work, join the 3.5 million employers worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all that you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire quickly. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster, and that makes a huge difference. In fact, according to Indeed data worldwide, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. What I love about Indeed is that all these tools are built in, so if you're an employer, you have everything you need to make a great listing. But Indeed has lots of tools if you're looking for a job as well. It really is fantastic. And with sponsored jobs, there are no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. You only pay for results. I like that too. And how fast does it all happen? Well, I've been talking for about a minute. And in that minute, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Look, there goes another one. So there's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners of Mac Power Users get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/MPU. That's Indeed, INDEED, Indeed.com/MPU. Using that URL shows Indeed that you support our show. And terms and conditions apply. Indeed.com/MPU. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Our thanks to Indeed for their support of the show and all of Relay.
Brian, you run a company, and in addition to making software, you've got customers to keep satisfied and email support to handle. I was just curious, what's your stack? How do you keep track of all of that stuff?
Well, I've got kind of an array of different things. So for customer support, well, for a long time I used a product called FogBugs, which was a combined customer support and bug tracking web application, which was served my needs very well for many years, and then eventually got sold to some venture capital company that made it slow and unreliable. I had to switch. So now I do support through Zendesk, which is a little overkill for what I need because they go all the way up to enterprise, deployments and have every feature in the kitchen sink. I do have someone who helps me part time with email support, so he basically takes a first run at the inbox and will usually answer about 2/3 of the emails, which are all the commonly asked stuff, and then the more complicated stuff will get passed on to me. So having some sort of multi-user support system was kind of a need because of that setup.
Sure, sure. Zendesk is such a common solution. We hear not just from developers, but a lot of people in tech.
hmm And it's a little pricey, but like I get a lot of value. Well, and I can be sure if there is something I want to do with it, there is some way to do it. I just have to figure out in the 7 million documentation pages where to find the thing.
Yeah, and then you write your app in Xcode, I presume.
Yep. All Xcode for development pretty much. I use GitHub issues for bug tracking now. I had to split that out too when I left FogBugs. And then I've used a few different crash reporting services over the years. Originally, I used a hockey app, which was I believe it was Michael Simmons who developed that one originally.
Yeah,
Um, and then that got sold to Microsoft, so I switched over to their App Center product, which got sunset a few years ago. So now I'm on Sentry.io, which is there's a lot of crash reporting solutions out there, but there aren't many with Mac OS support. So that's kind of one of the
hmm
the main reasons I ended up with them. And they're also one that they have way more features than I could ever use, but as I'm using it, I'm finding more and more useful stuff to do with it. So it's been pretty good.
Well, and as I'm sure as a small business, having those reporting tools bring data to you is really helpful. We use
hmm
Sentry, who they do sponsor some other relay shows, not ours. We use Sentry for the CMS that powers Relay, and like it's great. Like if something happens, me and our freelance developer, we get an email, we can see what's going on, and that's just our little project, right? That two of us interact with. But I know with public projects, being able to have a finger on what's going on is really important.
hmm And then I guess kind of tied in with all that is that I actually within PowerPhotos, I have in the help menu, there's a contact support item, which brings up a window, and the window lets you can type in your message, what problem you're having with, but it will also, PowerPhotos keeps a lot of logs and stuff from when you're doing, duplicate searches or merges or whatever. And so a lot of times to troubleshoot the problem, I'll need to look at those logs. So I have it built into the app where you can, click the button and it'll compress the logs and upload them to a secure server, and then I can download them on my end and take a look through them and start troubleshooting. I've had Over the years, I've had some kind of hack together Apple scripts and stuff to try to automate that process, but I eventually got kind of tired of I had I would end up with a million windows open and all these extra files to clean up and stuff. So I actually started writing my own little Mac app to kind of make my own bespoke support support app that uses the Zendesk API to show my tickets, and then I can automatically have a button that downloads and unzips the logs, and then I can see all their info and a little inspector pane. And it's also been good practice for learning Swift UI stuff. So that's kind of my Swift UI playground.
Yeah, that makes sense. Make a little app, right?
Mhm.
One of the topics that comes up anytime we have a developer on the show recently is artificial intelligence. I mean, I read one article that reports Google says 25% of its code is getting written by AI now. And that's like early days. I don't
Mhm.
know where that's going to end up. But for someone like you, I mean, you have had hands on your code now on, photos library managers for almost 25 years. I mean, you have a lot of expertise in that. Where does this artificial intelligence kind of coding revolution impact you?
I have to admit, when all these AI companies started started up their hype cycle over the last few years, I was extremely skeptical of all of it, especially because of the previous crypto NFT, ape JPEG revolution that never really materialized.
ETV, then we had crypto. It's like we've had two or three of these kind of things that fell flat. That
Yeah,
every,
Web3.
yeah,
But when it came to the coding stuff, I was seeing more and more people like on my social timelines start to say, "Oh, hey, I'm doing this stuff with AI coding, and it's really producing some interesting results." So I decided to dip my toes into it, and there's definitely some there. Like it's not it's a little trickier to judge because there is so much hype around it, and there is a lot of claims being slung around which don't live up to the hype. But I think there is definitely still a lot of usefulness to be found in the AI coding tools.
it's interesting to me because there's like two angles to this. There's like the veteran developers who are using it as, I guess, kind of a supplement to their code.
Hmm.
And then there's novices, people who are, the quote unquote vibe coders who are putting stuff together without a lot of knowledge of code, but they're just kind of like setting it free.
Hmm.
And it seems like the takes are very different depending on where you're coming from with this stuff.
Yeah, like I don't know. I guess there's in my mind there's kind of three or four categories. Like on the one end, yeah, there's the pure vibe coding, like someone who never looks at the code or never even cares to try to understand the code and just wants to turn out something that will do a thing for them. So yeah, so if you are just trying to get something done on your computer and you need to build a tool to do that, and it doesn't really matter if it's maintainable or if you even understand how it works, as long as it gets the thing done, then I say, go for it. I think that's going to be useful for a lot of people. And then on the other end of the spectrum would be a veteran developer like myself, where I view it more of as a powerful automation tool. Like I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna take AI code and just let it run wild and generate thousands of lines of code and never look at it. Like I've been using it in a manner where I'll have, say, some feature I want to implement, and the fact of the matter is that I obviously enjoy programming. I've been doing it for many years, but there can be a lot of grunt work involved in programming, and banging out. You have the thing you want to do, but you're going to have to write several hundred lines of code, and it's going to take you a couple hours to get through it. And the thing you have to do isn't necessarily groundbreaking or revolutionary. You're following a pattern you've done a million times in the past. and having a tool that can go uh, chug through that grunt work for you and basically leave me to do the interesting stuff of planning out the feature and figuring out how it should work and how things should be laid out and cleaning everything up to make it look good. For me, I view it as more of an accelerant and an automation tool. But I'm not gonna be the type that's gonna go vibe code an entire app. And so I think the place where it could get dangerous is kind of that in between zone where you have someone who, like you said, David, junior developers who are kind of trying to work their way up the ladder. But I can see if you are leaning on these AI tools too much and not really understanding the code they're putting out and not able to put that last 20% into it to fix it up and fix any problems there might be with it, that could you're not going to be learning as much as you go along if you're leaning too heavily on these tools, especially when you're starting out. So I think there's definitely a danger spot there to look out for, in that middle ground.
Even more so, people who they're not junior coders at all. They're just people who think, well, I'm going to make a cool tool, which is fine. But as soon as you put it on the internet and start sharing it, and you have no idea like how the security works, you're putting
Mm-hmm.
everybody else at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a tool and a product.
Yeah, that's well said. We like to close these episodes with some favorites, some apps and services, Brian, that you rely on, that you love, that maybe we haven't gotten to mention yet.
Yeah, well, yeah, most of my, I do all my stuff on the Mac, so I have a whole bunch of Mac apps. Probably the one aside from Xcode, which we mentioned earlier, probably the one I live the most in is BB Edit, the venerable text editor from Barebones Software. What I use BB Edit for is mostly, I mentioned those big merge log files that I get from customers. And BB Edit is the tool I found that is best able to handle these just gigantic text files and being able to do searches and greps and winnow down the logs to the data that I'm trying to find. Um, there's many other text editors out there that are great as editors, but BB Edit really shines when it comes to like processing text.
I mean, there's nothing like it on the Mac. I don't think I've ever had something that it can't open, like some big, SQL dump out of a database or some, unrealistically long document that lesser apps would choke on. BB Edit just takes it. It's incredible.
Yeah. What else? I use an app called SQL Pro. They have an array of different apps for different SQL databases. I use it for SQLite, the disk-based SQL database that many apps use these days. Just to look through database files, do queries. I use a lot of SQLite databases within PowerPhotos for my own uses. Both iPhoto and Photos use SQLite internally, so I'm usually, I'm often cracking open their databases to see what's going on under the hood in there, and it does really well for that. I use an amazing app called plist Edit Pro
Yeah.
for editing property list files. That was the scratch your own itch app that I wrote. Not iPhoto Manager, but plist Edit Pro. Yeah, it's I if you're a Mac or iOS developer, you're swimming in plists and JSON files all day. So I'm constantly opening stuff in plist Edit Pro. I use Transmit fairly often. That's one of the ones I use for downloading those big log files and working with my web server stuff. That one's been around from forever, from Panic. Xfiend is a hex editor that again works very well with large files and is really good for if I ever need to get into the bits and bytes of a file. I always throw it at Xfiend. Graphic converter, another very, very even longer than the Mac app that's been around. It's got to be over 30 years by now, I
Yeah.
figure. Um, and yeah, it's it can open any image file ever created and has every feature under the sun. I don't even know a third of what it can do, but if I need to go digging into, especially photo metadata and stuff like that, it's a great tool for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on their website it says it can import approximately 200 graphics formats. I don't know if anyone could name 200 graphic formats, but they're all in there.
Another app I've used a lot over the years, which unfortunately they just announced that they're discontinuing, is Script Debugger. This is
Yeah.
extremely powerful Apple script editor and debugger that has saved me countless hours, especially back in the early days when everything I was doing was through Apple Script. Script Debugger had all sorts of pro features that would really let you dive into AppleScript, both in terms of writing scripts and in terms of implementing AppleScript in your own app. I've always had at least some amount of script support in my apps, and using it to debug your own app. That's another app that's been around for a very long time, and I guess that developer must be retiring now, which
Mm-hmm.
is um, and yeah, so I'll miss being able to use it whenever it eventually does no longer function. Hopefully it'll keep chugging for a while, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it around for 30 years. Like, there's a link to
Yeah.
it on Macintosh repository, the classic Mac OS version of it.
hmm
Just an
Yeah.
unbelievable run.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I upgraded to every single version since I started using it. I probably didn't start using it until version 3 or something like that. But and then on the development side of things, there's an app I use quite a bit for Swift UI stuff. It's called a companion for Swift UI. I think the website is swiftlabs.com, which has a blog that has a lot of articles about Swift UI, but they publish this Mac app, which is basically a documentation on steroids for Swift UI. It has indexed all the various Swift UI APIs for each version of Mac OS and iOS. They keep it up to date. But in addition to that, almost every API in there will have some sort of code sample that demonstrates how to use it. And a lot of those code samples are actually interactive inside the app. So, like, if it's demonstrating some view that lays out containers or something like that, it'll have a little code sample and it might have some sliders. And like within the app, you can move the sliders back and forth and see how it, when you change this parameter, it changes the layout or whatever. So if you're doing any amount of Swift UI development, a companion for Swift UI is well worth the purchase, because it has just a ton of information and is very well laid out, good search engine, these interactive examples. It's really great.
Well, Brian, congratulations on starting a project right out of college and now nearly 25 years later, still making a great app for us power users. We really appreciate it. PowerPhotos is key software for many of our listeners and us as well. And we just wanted to thank you for all your hard work on that.
Well, thank you. It's been quite the ride, and I obviously enjoy creating the software, but I think one of the things that has really made this particular product stick with me is just that photos are very, very special to a lot of people. They're very valuable, and being able to help people get their photos in order and get things organized and find sometimes rescue photos they thought were lost, or clean out their collection, or whatever they need to do. It's been very satisfying, and I'm glad there's so many people out there that have found the software to be useful over the years. It's been really great.
All right. So where do people go if they want to keep up with what you're doing?
You can go to fatcatsoftware.com is my company website. You can download PowerPhotos and PO Static Pro there and view all the documentation and stuff. I have a sporadically updated blog there that's mostly just product updates and stuff like that. I do write on Mastodon. I'm Webster at mastodon.social, and then I also have an account for the company, which is Fatcat Software at mastodon.social that posts updates and stuff like that.
Excellent. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU. If you want to sign up for more Power Users, you can do it right there for the ad-free extended version of the show. Like I said, we're going to be talking about this new rumored A18 MacBook today on More Power Users. Thanks to our sponsors, Squarespace and Indeed, and we'll see you next time.